Welcome to All Things Litigation Finance. My name is Ted Farrell. I'm the founder of Litigation Funding Advisors. Today, I am happy to be joined by one of the top guys in the insurance game, Michael Perich from Lockton. Michael, welcome aboard. How about a quick intro on you and what you do?
Thanks so much, Ted. Pleasure to be here. Enjoyed getting to know you and work with you these past couple of years. You know, I'm a head of Lockton's litigation insurance efforts here, which means I place insurance around intangible legal assets, generally speaking, and that could go in two different ways. For the purpose of this podcast, we're going to focus on the plaintiff side products, but there are a whole bevy of defense side products out there. And essentially, what we do is we help our clients structure insurance policies to allow them to recognize value from their contingent legal assets that they otherwise wouldn't be able to value. So, when you have a contingent legal judgment or you are investing capital in cases that, can negatively impact your bottom line, accountants don't give you any credit for that. And when you put an insurance policy around it, you're able to take this really esoteric, intangible asset and create it into something real that everyone can quantify and value. I've been at Lockton now for almost 3 years. Before joining Lockton, I was a litigation funder, a litigator, and a litigation funding broker. So I've been in and around litigation funding for almost 8 years now, which is a really long time.
All right. So if I'm counting on my scoreboard and I'm counting sides of the deal, you've been on the law firm side of the deal looking for money. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. You've been the money, right?
Yep.
Tell me about your time as the money. Where were you working?
So I had I was working at Keller Capital and then was part of the acquisition when Keller was acquired by Burford, which was a really interesting time to be in the funding business. That was my first exposure to litigation finance. My first real exposure to litigation finance, I will say, when I was first out of law school in 2012, I gave Adam Gerchen a cold call to ask him about what litigation funding was, because I thought it would be really interesting in the insurance context to be using litigation funding.
And those were the days when he was still taking cold calls. Those aren't quite as good these days. Do those still work or what?
I don't know, but
maybe I'll try one. I've never met. Maybe I'll fire one off after.
I mean, Adam, if you're listening, thank you for taking that and sparking my journey. So had a really great call with him and learned about it, and then they had an opening. Keller had an opening for someone who was my level. I was 4 years out of law school at the time. Joined Keller to help with their origination efforts there on the origination team. So basically doing all the initial screen of opportunities that came through, as well as, reaching out, originating business, all that fun stuff, light underwriting, which was candidly an amazing seat to be in as a young lawyer because, Keller and Burford, once it went over to Burford combined, probably saw 1,500 to 2,000 claims there of investment grade claims, which was really cool. At Burford, they allowed me to grow a little bit more, and I did light underwriting and some heavier underwriting on certain cases, along with the assistance of the folks that we know and love from there. At some point, I thought I wanted to litigate again, and that was an interesting experience, I will say, to go back into litigation after being a funder.
I can only. I'm meet and confers, right?
Yeah.
Protective orders, log answers. Yeah,
oh my gosh. Right. I forgot. I didn't forget about it, but I forgot what the grind was like there.
The grind, yeah.
I really, the firm I was at was Ice Miller. I really respect that firm. They do a great job. They're really competent counsel.
And they have a big, insurance practice, which
that's where I was in. Yeah.
I'm going to guess. I'm going to cut you off here and say that might have sort of sparked coming over here, sort of with those chops.
Yeah. So I was part of their policyholder group. So that was a lot of fun and got to do all sorts of interesting.
Mean sometimes the insurers deny the claim? Is that why there's a policyholder?
Yeah.
I have to just pay it. Then you just because I saw an ad, State Farm, they have an app. You just do it right at the accident and you just take the pictures and you're there. Is that how it works generally? Or most of the time?
Depends.
Most of the time.
Yeah. So there's a big difference between the types of policies that I place now and the types of policies I litigated. So I was litigating third-party policies where there's just so many exclusions in those because you don't know what you're insuring. You're insuring some like thing that might happen in the future, and you want to make sure you're only insuring and you're only covering really what you agreed to cover at the outset. And this is where you can get into fights about like, what do we mean with what a pollution exclusion is or something like that.
Or
And
did COVID was COVID business interruption?
yeah,
Of
things
course
like
not,
that.
right? No way.
Yeah.
It didn't do anything, right?
Uh,
I mean, I had to
so
close my business, but there was no interruption. You
yeah.
must have read the policy. Did I read the policy wrong, Michael?
Well, they would. I think there was what was there like some like random some things had like a communicable disease exclusion.
Sure.
Anyway, so now what I like about the policies I place is we actually know what we're insuring because it's
Yeah.
a known risk. So the insuring agreements just are really tight. The policies I'm negotiating run now. It is literally 9 pages long. They're really, to the point. Some are, 10, 15 is the longest one I've seen in terms of like the real docs. I mean, there's always going to be, endorsements and things added on, but it's a really tight policy.
Right. So, all right. So
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So some people watching this, of course, a lot of people in our world would know that all anyone in our world talks about is insurance. This is I think we are a litigation finance podcast. So my real question for you is, how has insurance worked its way more and more into litigation funding deals?
Yeah, no, happy to do that. I think it's really interesting, and I think in order to help explain how it impacted, I think it's helpful to just take a step back and look at what insurance is meant to do and what litigation funding is historically meant to do, and then we can talk about the cross sections between the two. So insurance has been and is a very efficient market for warehousing legal risks. And we see this because a majority of the insurance out there relates to third-party claims, and third-party claims are lawsuits. And they're really efficient markets for warehousing that legal risk. By effectively,
so the typical thing there, just step back, would be,
yeah.
I'm a consumer products company, and someday someone may bring claims about my product. So I'm going to buy insurance to cover my cost of defense. I mean, is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, correct. So they're really efficient at doing that, and taking premium for that. And because the way the insurance markets work is they don't pay out a claim immediately. They pay it out over a period of time. They take a premium and essentially are taking the put option on a litigation, right? So they're saying, we're going to get paid up front. And if this does not go as anticipated, then we'll pay out a claim at that point. And
Right.
it varies the level of confidence of a claim payout there and all that.
Or after your former colleagues at Ice Miller write 10 nasty grams, they'll pay out a complaint.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Depending on
Okay.
where.
And
so
how much the claim is for.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say on the products we'll be talking about, these are a little different, as I said before, than your third parties. So these are a lot. These should not and have not historically had as much back and forth as you would in a normal coverage litigation, and that's consistent with the markets they grew up out of, which are these reps and warranty markets, generally speaking. So just to get back to it, what I think is cool is that considering the insurance markets are so efficient at handling and warehousing legal risk, they're able to work with alternative sources of capital or litigation funders or credit shops to really warehouse a lot of the downside legal risk associated with a litigation funding transaction, which ultimately, Ted, for your clients, will lead to more efficient funding deals overall, assuming that they want to use the funding concept, or it will lead to more efficient risk transfers, which is all good.
Yeah, and actually that is so the term that I was thinking we were going to talk today, and in some way, so litigation funding is both a capital source, but also a risk transfer in this sense. There are law firms that traditionally have contingent fee practices, and in fact, if they've been successful over the years, do not need outside capital to do cases.
Correct.
But as a risk transfer tool, have taken funding, right? They've said, we think we would need to do $15 million of work on this case, and we feel very good about it, but bad things happen, the law changes, the Supreme Court takes cert on a big legal issue, in this case, 3 years in. And so, what I've seen sometimes is law firms basically using funding as a hedge and a risk transfer. And obviously, insurance is the classic risk transfer tool that exists in the world. So to me, it's actually only natural that they would be complementary. So let me ask you this, because this is where I think the rubber often hits the road in these deals. And, I've worked on these deals, and, as you are, saying, have worked on deals where insurance was used to help, overall, lower the overall cost of capital, help the deal get done. But I guess the question is, you are entering, if there's going to be funding, and I think today we'll just talk about ones where there's funding. It's really tripartite, right? So, but what's really interesting to me is, and you would know this because you've been the funder, you've been the funding broker, and you now are the insurance broker. Tell me about the difference between the underwrite that the insurer does and what it's worried about, and the underwrite that the funder does. Because what I tell people all the time is the insurer is laser focused on loss. And then the funder is laser focused on, we're trying to hit these types of returns, right? And so I'm just sort of interested, your sort of perspective on how the same So let's just say this. Let's say we were talking about a law firm had a 5-case portfolio where they were seeking X dollars. Talk to me about how the insurer is going to look at that transaction.
Yeah, happy to do so. So first, the insurer is not going to care about collection risk at all because they don't cover collection risk. So they aren't going to do what a litigation funder would have to do and look at, like, oh, is Microsoft a solvent entity? Yes, of course it is, but they wouldn't have to go do that type of analysis, which is a significant thing to mention up front, that they do not cover that collection risk. Sometimes you can get them to do it, but majority speaking, no. The carriers care about the loss of capital, generally speaking, on these policies. So when they look at it, they'll say, like, okay, let's say 5-case portfolio, $20 million deployed. The law firm is 60-40 with the client across those cases. These all fit the usual, 1 to 10 rubric that I think has been kind of the rule of thumb, for lack of a better word, for quite some time. And that meaning, across that 5-case portfolio, and there is, $4 million invested in each case, the expected return to the law firm in each one of those is going to be $40 million. Let's just use that as a hypothetical. Or it's a law firm side portfolio, so let's just assume $20 million.
Right.
The carrier is essentially going to look at all the cases and see if 1 or 2 of those cases are going to meet the minimum threshold to overcome the $40 million that they're eventually going to deploy in the case. The other important thing to note.
So these are you would call those like your anchors?
The same thing as when you were a funder, you were, underwriting cases, right? You always looked at the anchors. The other important thing to think about is, when they look over this stuff, they're also going to see, the budget is assuming through trial, and you're assuming burn through trial. So if you're assuming burn through trial on a $20 million portfolio, most cases, if they lose, will lose early, before there's some material settlement that comes through. So in that instance, that $20 million of capital, insurance capital they have at risk, might actually only ever be $10 million of a total loss scenario.
Right. So let's go back. So if a law firm said, because I think this is important for people thinking about this. I can't as a law firm call you up and say, hey, we plan to do $30 million of work over the next 5 years. Can you guarantee that even if we lose them all on day one, we're going to get $30 million, right?
Yeah.
So what I've seen, and I think you're going to sort of confirm here, is as you go, it's ensuring the work you've done. So we send our invoice every month. We did $150,000 of work. We paid the experts $100,000. Therefore, we've put that in. We showed you. We've done the bill. Blah blah blah. Then those, or a portion of those. We don't have to get into the splits, but a portion of those fees and the expenses have now comes sort of under the umbrella of reimbursement in the event of a loss.
Yeah. So this is all coming down to like what is insurable loss.
Right.
So you only can insure what you actually lose. You
Right.
can't insure some expected profit. So here, the insurable loss is in this concept of the law firm's, work in progress that they're doing on the cases, which I think is an innovative concept and pretty fun, and they're fun to work on and fun to place. The other side of the coin, if this is a funder side deal, which funders do use insurance to help hedge downside in certain scenarios.
Well, and I think that's where, in sort of my, look, when I started thinking about using insurance, because look, I'm usually called at the outset to try to get a project done. And, I was, going to conferences and the funders were saying, hey, this is great. We put out all these, we put out all these risks, and then we turned around and insured it. And so I thought to myself, well, why don't we just insure it at the outset to try and see if we can get the deal done, right?
Yeah.
But tell me about, I think what, the sort of the parlance would be, a funder wrap. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so it's a little different than a law firm wrap. So it depends on the deployment cycle of the funder. But hypothetically, let's say that you have use the 20 million example. So you have a $20 million portfolio that's going to be a drawdown to the law firm over time, or even just an upfront monetization of the fee. Or let's do a corporate side. Let's do a corporate side deal. I think that's easier. So corporate side deal and some antitrust class actions, they're just going to do an upfront monetization for that group, and they're going to put out $20 million. Now, in that context, the client there, the company, it might find it difficult to quantify that loss because, I'm expected to receive it, but I don't actually know if I'm going to receive it.
Right.
Whereas the funder can really quantify their loss by saying, I'm giving you $20 million. If I don't get it back, it's a loss.
Right.
So in that instance, you insure the full $20 million in that context. So it's all about the amount of capital being deployed, whether it's the law firm's internal capital via work in progress, or whether it is the whole cold hard cash of a lit funder.
Okay. So what has this sort of, I would say, really like exponential growth in deals that I see now that have insurance component. What have you seen vis-a-vis what that means to the eligible and willing participants in this market that may not have been here?
Are you asking from like an insurer?
No, so in other words, let's say I ran a huge multi-strategy hedge fund, but I don't have, 5 former, litigators to pick cases. It's really hard to participate, right, in the market. Yeah. And, what I've seen, and I'm just interested in your perspective, is the ability to really hedge that downside has brought in a lot of new participants. And look, that's just been like my kind of like anecdotal experience, but
it's my experience too. It's my experience as well. It's just, litigation funders aren't going to be, their traditional litigation funders aren't going to be the folks that like these products as much as your multi-strategy hedge funds. And the reason behind that is, these policies aren't cheap, and they mute the return that a litigation funder will ultimately get. And when you're, wanting a 25, 30% IRR, and you're buying an insurance policy that costs 10 to 15% upfront of the insured limit, that will mute your IRR. No question about it. But for a credit shop and a credit fund, a multi-strategy private credit fund or what have you, these insurance policies are great because they're providing a downside hedge on a really, interesting asset class that, from a portfolio standpoint, likely and a very high probability will not lose money, but you never know. And it's better to have that sleep at night cover, the insurance cover behind it, than not, because you don't want to lose your job because you put $50 million out on some litigation funding campaign, and then the campaign had some unexpected event that just tanked it all.
Right, and I think as an asset class, one of the things that does make it attractive is if you are looking to make uncorrelated and very high returns, taking the risk on a case is a real opportunity to do that. Because I think what most litigators would tell you is, when you really like it, at the outset of the case, it's really hard to have a professional opinion that there's a better than an 80% chance of ultimately collecting, because things happen. Juror number 6 doesn't like you. Intervening change in law. Company goes bankrupt. Third party discovery, ruins the case. Whatever those things are. And by the way, that I think is what makes this, for a lot of people, a really attractive asset class for those who really like risk. But I also think that as this grows and as more law firms and claimants want to utilize this, right, they don't necessarily want to pay that high risk premium. And so if you can spread risk, you can probably access cheaper capital. But let me ask you this, and I tell people this all the time. In my estimation, at the sort of outset of a case, it's not as if like I have a case that no one would fund, but magically an insurer will take it. Like in my look, the deals that I've seen that have gotten insurance wrappers are deals that, litigation funders would do absent the wrap, but people use the, insurance wrap to get cheaper capital. But then, look, I hope you're going to tell me that you can insure the worst cases in the world, right? And then the Chamber of Commerce can come on next week, and you can be Mr. Champerty of the month or something like that. But tell me about that.
No, that is not the case. The insurers have a pretty tight screen, I would say, equivalent to the tightness of a litigation funder at that point, if not in certain instances a bit more aggressive.
It's just a little less on the collection, and that's really
it's the collection
duration,
component.
and the duration, right?
Yeah,
or not, right.
And the other thing to think about as well is that, and what I've found this product to probably be the most used is to help a litigation funder or a capital source make a larger deployment, because you are insuring more of that risk off. Because as you know, a litigation funder, we're talking about $20 million portfolio. That's a big check for a lot of litigation funders out there. And that
if you have a $200 million fund,
that's 10%.
That's really about as close to the sun as you can fly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to feel really, really good. For sure. Totally.
Yeah. And this is a tool to help them not be so nervous about putting out a larger check size, because for better or worse, legal budgets have continued to go up. I mean, you've seen in the past, what, 3 years, you've probably seen a market increase in legal budgets over time, because everything's increasing.
I've seen we just need $1.5 million to just finish off that draft complaint we sent across. And people tell you they have, $3 million in whip into their 2-page memo that they did, for the funders. Yeah, it is tough. But look, I mean, people are in the allocation business, right? And there's all different streams of allocation. So the way I kind of look at insurance is, there are people who went out and raised credit funds, and they say, we want to allocate money against good insured risk.
Yep.
And so when there are litigations where, there's, a top 10, plaintiff's firm comes to you with a 5-case portfolio, it's hard to really see, how they're not going to make their money back. Right.
Yeah.
Well, boy, what a great, but the thing is, that firm maybe doesn't want to pay sort of retail, but with insurance, it's very possible to kind of turn it around, I think.
Yeah. The other thing, I think, just to get to that point of loss too, and looking at it, I mean, if you're betting the litigation market, and you're betting the litigation market for like a law firm that's on half rates over on a portfolio of cases, from an actuarial standpoint, like the likelihood of loss when a funder is charging the returns they do, or even at a higher interest rate, is relatively low. You're expecting, and you're aligning the incentives in such a way. I think that's the important thing about this. The insurance comes in and helps to really have everyone align the incentives for the best outcome that comes through. Which is a cool concept. This goes into, the other kind of products out there as well, like adverse judgment insurance is meant to, help everyone behave rationally with settlement. Judgment preservation, as it is normally envisioned, is supposed to help with that as well.
Well, here's my rule. I'm not going to talk about judgment preservation. And the reason I'm not going to talk about it is, any judgment that gets posted on a docket anywhere, the lawyers and the parties have 55 phone calls from insurance brokers the next day. So nobody needs it. Once it makes Law 360, they'll find you. If you want to call me and ask me advice after they call, but I don't think we need to go through judgment preservation.
No, I would agree.
So I'm a law firm. I'm a funder. I'm a claim holder. I want insurance. How do I get in touch with you?
So you could, if Ted's working on it,
Smash
Ted,
the like button. Do you want to smash that like button at the bottom of the video?
Yeah. But if Ted's working on it and you're working with Ted, which I think, one of the best out there, if you're working with Ted on it, then Ted could rope me in and we can go there. If not, you can go to our website, and find my contact information there, or LinkedIn, or just send me an email at mperich@lockton.com.
All right. Well, Michael, it has been a pleasure. Thanks for coming, and really appreciate it. See you, man.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Talk soon. Bye.